The Struggles When Working with a Sovereign Nation by Taylor Chi. Everyone knows the story about how Christopher Columbus wanted to go out and voyage to America, and when he arrived, it was downhill from there. Here is a little introduction about Native American history from the 1400s to the 1800s. This background information will also give insight on how Native Americans have fought for themselves, their rights, and what they believed in, as well as their land against the United States over the past couple of hundred years. Fast forwarding to the 1900s, in 1934, the Indian Reorganization Act was passed. In 1946, the Indian Claims Commission was established. In 1952, Voluntary Relocation Program introduced. In 1968, Indian Civil Rights Act extends many Bill of Rights protections to tribal citizens. In 1968, American Indian Movement was founded. In 1973, Siege at Wounded Knee in South Dakota occurred. In 1974, International Indian Treaty Council was organized. And in 1994, Indian Self-Determination Act amendments were passed by Congress. What is a sovereign nation? The definition of a sovereign nation is: sovereignty is the power of a state to do everything necessary to govern itself, such as making, executing, and applying laws, imposing and collecting taxes, making war and peace, and forming treaties or engaging in commerce with foreign nations. How are Native Americans considered to be a part of a sovereign nation? Well, considering Native Americans were denied their rights, they fought against American society to be considered a sovereign nation. After the siege at Wounded Knee, the goal at first was to, quote, free Pine Ridge from the shackles imposed by the federal government and to inspire other tribes to follow suit. By restoring responsible governments of their own, Indian peoples would regain their sovereignty, take care of their own affairs, and be able to determine their own futures. Is it a struggle to work with tribal reservations? I'll say it again. Native Americans were denied their rights, and so they fought against American society to be considered a sovereign nation. It took them a long time to be recognized as equals. There was so much damage created in the past for there to be a relationship between the United States government and Native Americans. Through the ups and downs, Native Americans fought through the difficulty to finally be where they are today, to finally have control over their own lands. It can be hard for them to easily work with outside people, such as non-natives. Many tribal reservations might strategically process how they will work with the United States due to the lack of trust. With an eventful past that follows Native American history, Indigenous people do not easily forget all that has happened. When the siege at Wounded Knee came to an end, quote, once again we Indians had accepted the white man's promises, just as our ancestors had, end quote, reflected Russell means, quote, once again the government of the United States had lied, end quote. Look at it this way: because it took Native Americans a long time before they were considered to be a sovereign nation, that they don't want to easily give power to the United States to do whatever they want on their sacred land. A good example of how it is difficult to work on tribal reservations was in 2016 in North Dakota. The Dakota Access Pipeline was encouraged to be processed and finished in the future, all in a town called Cannonball, located on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in North Dakota, is where chaos was created. The project is to carry out a pipeline from rock to 4 states that is meant to transfer oil. This new pipeline is supposed to increase the economy with new jobs and more oil project opportunities. However, where the pipeline crosses on the reservation concerns, quote, tribal leaders argue that it threatens the drinking water for thousands of Native Americans and has caused the destruction of sacred artifacts and burial sites, end quote. Now, this pipeline at the time was close to being completed until many protesters, thousands of them actually, felt strongly against this project to be passing through tribal lands. For months, there were protests, many were arrested, and some were even killed for the fight against the pipeline. The problem was not only that the pipeline could threaten the drinking water, but also that it meant Native Americans would be bullied by the U.S. government again, like they have been for hundreds of years. Why is it hard to work with sovereign nations such as Native American tribal reservations? Well, Native Americans are a sovereign nation, and since they are able to make their own decisions, tribal lands won't easily be bullied into the decisions made by the U.S. government. Outside people who don't know about American Indian history will see them as difficult to work with or hostile Indians, or any other negative connotation that comes to mind. when really Indigenous people just want to protect themselves and their families. For example, when the Dakota Access Pipeline protest took place, Indigenous people fought, and according to Carla Youngbear, a protester who gave a statement when questioned in an interview, quote, Carla Youngbear of the Meskwaki Potawatomi tribe made her third trip from the central Kansas to be at the protest site. Quote, I have grandchildren and I'm going to have great-grandchildren, she said. Quote, they need water. Water is why I'm here. End quote. It is important to keep tribal land safe and away from companies who are saturated with the hopes and dreams of making money. At the protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline, a protester said, and many Indigenous people could agree, quote, this pipeline represents something deeper. End quote. Goldtooth said, quote, we have to start worrying about the rights of our future generations, end quote. If Native Americans do not protect themselves, their families, or their land, then the past will just be recreating itself. Take a look at what Mary Crow Dog said in her book Lakota Woman. The thing to keep in mind is that laws are framed by those who happen to be in power and for the purpose of keeping them in power. It is not impossible to work on Indian reservations. The, quote, first reservation established for the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community tribes was 64,000 acres across the Gila River Reservation in 1859, end quote. It is quite impossible to be able to work with tribal reservations. Scottsdale Community College is an example of that. The college is located on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, and to the right is a YouTube video that mentions how Scottsdale Community College came to be and what it has to offer.